I'm glad that you decided to come back yet again. The impetus for the last session 2 weeks ago, well, I suppose there were really several impulses. One of them was that since I've been diagnosed as living a life with cancer, and I've now undergone 3 chemotherapy treatments, and at the time but there was a certain kind of empathy, sympathy, a certain kind of curiosity. Gee, what does he look like, sound like, if I dare speak so highly of, how you might have thought about me along the way. So there was that impetus for people, I think, to tune in. And now people have gotten their fill of that, so there are about half as many people as there were the last time, at least at the moment. But the bigger points that I wanted to make are the following: that it was also my birthday, and it was Erev my father's birthday. And that's what drew me to the poem, to Amichai's poem about receiving Torah and about receiving Torah from his father in the way that he received Torah from his father. So my story and Amichai's story and all of our stories living in the presence of fathers or parents or other people from whom we received and still receive Torah are relevant, and all are echoing inside that story as we shine our light, our own personal lights on that story, of that archetypal story of looking up the mountain and getting something from some inscrutable source that's beyond our vision. As we shine our own light on that story, the shadow gets longer and deeper, and we become more a part of what it means to be standing at that mountain. And that's just the way scripture ought to work. It's just the way Torah ought to work. It's certainly the way it works in the world of Midrash, which, as you know, is the world of my heroes, of the sages of the early centuries, whom I hope always to emulate, and whose methods of inquiry and whose curiosity, to me, are the parade examples of curiosity that help move the Jewish world forward. We imagine ourselves into their stories, into the ancient stories that they helped open up for us, these mythic categories that are, and by mythic, I don't mean something not true, I mean something that's deeply true. I mean something that's so true that it is both my story and your story as well, and our story, and we fill it in particular ways. And if you found yourself or part of your own story coming out or being told by Amichai reading a story in the presence, or telling a story of his Torah received from Father as the Torah received from Sinai, if you found yourself sharing any of that story and standing at one and the same time in front of your own Sinai and in front of the Sinai of Exodus chapter 19 and chapter 20, then the poet's accomplished what he needed to accomplish, and the Midrash has accomplished what it wanted to accomplish, which is to allow the sacred text the dignity of being filled. All the spaces between the letters need to be filled. Oftentimes they don't look like receptacles, spill water over the top of that 3-dimensional Torah text that you might put up on part of it on your pegboard or something, and create your own little waterworks project. Some of it's going to get held, some of it's going to pass through, but a great amount gets held, and that becomes our story that fills the ancient text. That's exactly what we ought to do. And it was so much fun. It took me to a great place to be sharing that story and that poem with everyone. And there was a lot of participation and a lot of interest, and I did receive a fair number of notes about it afterwards. And the truth is that even before receiving the notes, I had decided that, just on a further impulse, that maybe we'd continue to explore this theme of Sinai a bit, of what it means to receive the Torah. And I promised a poem about, or a poem written by a woman that features a different view of what it means to be standing at the base of Sinai and looking up. And this poem by Chava Pinchas Cohen is a great example of someone who is a fellow traveler of those ancient sages. in the way she reads the texts, in the way that she reads the stories. She's not a political cohort, part of their political cohort necessarily, or part of their theological, doesn't share their theological framework. She was born in 1955, the first in her family to be born in the land of Israel. Her parents are Bulgarian. And they are strict Orthodox socialists, secularists, socialists. And Chava came to religion and religious language, not so much to religious practice, but to religious language and to the images and the sacred stories. She came to them on her own, and she came to them with her and through her friends and through her society as she was growing up. And she has been a teacher and the editor of an important multifaceted arts journal called Dimui, the editor of that journal for a long time. And this poem is a part for whole, really. She writes poetry that is secular. She writes poetry that is love poetry. She writes poetry that is about personal loss. She has a wide range. But this poem is a poem that puts her at the base of Mount Sinai in a very different and a very interesting way. Let's see. Let me read the poem. You have it in front of you, and we'll look at the English. If there's a Hebrew word that grabs your attention, or you think we ought to double click on that particular word, or the English word that is interesting to you and you want to know what the Hebrew is, we'll try to puzzle it out together. She says, they've all gone to the mountain to wait and see, to wait in deep silence, not the norm, even donkeys, even the camels. In this quiet, not a bird chirped, even children on their father's shoulders. The quiet is too great to bear, like before some great and awesome moment. But I wanted to finish and hang the laundry, to make some room for myself, some time for myself to freshen up. I heated milk for the baby so he wouldn't get hungry, so that he wouldn't cry, heaven forbid, at a bad moment. How much longer till the end? Anticipation that the laundry will dry, and who knows for the baby. No one knew. But I saw that a light wind, like a sleeper's breath, passed through the laundry, billowing the middle of my robe, and the Sabbath tablecloth was a white sail in the middle of the wilderness. And we sailed away on the blue sky, far off to a place where we'll split pomegranates and devour their juices, to fill the place where love has a distinct name. She insists in this poem, she insists upon being where the Torah implies, and many a sage, in fact, I would dare to say I've never encountered a rabbinic interpretation that thought otherwise, that everybody was there. Atem nitzavim kulchem. Atem nitzavim hayom kulchem lifnei Adonai Elohechem. You are standing here this day, all of you, before the Lord your God. The maids and the water drawers and the chieftains and the middle-class folks and everybody. The Torah is very explicit at the beginning of the parsha called Nitzavim, which means you are fixed. You're standing at attention. You're all here at the base of the mountain. Part of the last third of Moses' great, mighty, awesome, valedictory address, which is the whole book of Deuteronomy. For a man who kept saying at the beginning of his story, I don't speak very well, he sure could speak by the end. At least the Moses of Deuteronomy has quite the sonorous and wondrous voice and vocabulary. Atem nitzavim kulchem hayom. You are all standing this day before me, from the least of you to the greatest of you. Not so, says Chava Pinchas Cohen. I wasn't there. I needed some time on my own. I needed some time by myself. I needed to finish some tasks. I wanted to freshen up. I wanted to feed the baby so he wouldn't be hungry, so that he wouldn't cry. God forbid. Shelo yivkeh chalila. God forbid. You can hear my grandmother saying, feed the baby now. God forbid he's going to cry at the Seder. God forbid. Chalila. The universe would be folded, spindled, and mutilated. Chalila means something like folded, spindled, and mutilated. The universe would be folded and spindled and mutilated if, God forbid, the baby would cry at the wrong moment. Anticipation that the laundry will dry, and who knows for the baby. No one knew, but I saw that a light wind, like a sleeper's breath, passed through the laundry, billowing the middle of my robe, and the Sabbath tablecloth was a white sail in the middle of the wilderness. And we sailed away on the blue sky, far off to a place where we'll split pomegranates and devour their juices, to the place where love has a distinct name. Well, I didn't read the whole poem twice, just the last part of it that I read better the second time than the first time. Atem nitzavim kulchem hayom. You are there. You are all there today. She doesn't say kulchem. That would be y'all. She says kulam. They all. They've all gone to the mountain to wait and see, to wait in deep silence. Shelo kemin hagam. It's not their way to be so quiet. It's not something that we have, it's not a capacity that we've sharpened to be together in public, all of us together, in a very socially not distanced way. We haven't refined that. Shelo kemin hagam. Even donkeys, even the camels, in this quiet, not a bird chirped. Even children on their father's shoulders. The quiet, the hasheket rav minaso. The quiet is too great to bear, like before some great and awesome moment. But I wanted to finish the laundry. The hasheket rav minaso. The silence is too great to bear. The quiet is too great to bear. Like before some moment that is, listen for it, nora v'gadol. Great and awesome. Sound familiar to anybody who's got the liturgy at heart? Ha'el, Hagadol, V'Hagibor, V'Hanura. This is a way that Moses calls God, a name that Moses calls God, a name that with which the rabbis were so taken that they made it the name with which to inaugurate the Amidah. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu v'Elohei Avotenu Elohei Avraham Elohei Yitzchak Elohei Yaakov Sarah Rivka Rachel v'Leah Ha'el Hagadol Hagibor v'Hanora El Elyon. She has two of those names, Gadol, Nora v'Gadol.
Which line is that? The seventh line?
Some great and awesome moment. The Hebrew is exactly equivalent to it. So I'm curious, I do have one more thing to say to set this in its context. At as a story that she inherited in some way from the rabbis, even as she photoshops herself into the story. And that has to do with the silence. According to the rabbinic movie that they never made but wish they'd had the technology to make, everything in the world got quiet. Has mipanav kol haaretz. Be silent before him, all the earth. This is the greatest, deepest, and highest silence that you can imagine before these earth-splitting, earth-shattering words. But such silence, apparently, she can hear the silence from where she is. Who knows what else she can hear? She wonders how long this is going to take. And now the stage is set. A couple of readings and a couple of partial readings of the poem and a couple of midrashic elements about the nature of the rabbinic story that in which she sees herself and into which she puts herself. And now it can be your turn. Anything getting your attention?
We've got a raised hand from Stephen Jaffe.
So it's actually Mindy is here.
Oh, sorry, thank you.
That's okay. Yeah, I'm sharing my husband's computer. And I'm thinking about Judith Plasko's book, Standing Again at Sinai, I think it is.
Yes.
And about the silence that she talks about, the silence about the voices of women at Sinai. And as I read the poem, I read the hanging the laundry very differently than you did, Steve. And I read it like a mother who's like, oh, they're going off. I just need to get the laundry done. I'll just do this one more thing. I don't really have, I know that's important, but if I can just get this done, I'll get on with my day. And then the baby, maybe the baby won't cry if I feed the baby, and then I can go. And then the beauty of this breeze that comes towards her is that she didn't need to be there. It came to her. You know, she was in such a different space than having
Beautiful.
either the privilege or the invitation to be there, right? Because I can't remember exactly what Judith Plasko talks about, but I know there was some part of it that left out women, is my memory.
Some part of it that
Left out women at Sinai, right?
absolutely.
Yeah, and so this poem in some way also feels like a response to that to me. You know, it's very much, I imagine a lot of them, you know, working moms on here have that sense of like, okay, I'm just gonna finish the laundry and then I'll get to that. 'Cause I just gotta get this one last thing done. So.
There's some privileging of tasks. Is there a way of defining what gets priority or what is the holy work?
Right.
You can't leave it. You can't leave it behind. And there's actually, she's hoping for something for herself too. It's not.
Well, getting the laundry done is for yourself. I mean,
Well, that's true.
check.
That's true. But she is also looking for a little bit of time to freshen up. Right.
Mhm.
So yeah, maybe she does have some other social thing in mind. Maybe there's an after Sinai party of which we are not aware. Because nobody ever reported it to us. Thank you. I wonder, do you have Judith Plasko's book still? Do you know?
I'll go look for it on the
Oh,
shelf.
no, you don't. No, you know, God forbid you should have to do that kind of work now. But when you want to stand again at Sinai, if that's a page that just has a couple of sentences, I know how good a keyboarder you are. Maybe you could just send a little excerpt or tell me where to find it.
Well, what I'm also remembering is she had an article in Tikkun years ago, and she talked about, I remember her talking about a silence that is so vast we don't hear it. And
Yeah,
so
thank you.
it might be in the book, it might not. but
Thank you. Thank you.
look. And I'll look and I'll send it.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, there was, I thought I saw another hand.
Richard Cody.
Thanks, Rick Cody. Beautiful. Along those lines, exactly. She was going home and she was doing, in essence, what we were being commanded to do at Sinai. She was already there, and she was acting wonderfully to do what she was there to do. And she merited kind of like a Jewish Aladdin's rug, magic carpet with a Sabbath tablecloth, bringing her to it. So it went and got her, and spiritually or in a different dimension, brought her to Sinai on a different plane, a different level. So she was there. She was included, maybe rewarded for having done her merit, and then she also was included in some level by the tablecloth going to the pomegranate and happy destination.
Thanks for adding to that image of the billowing white sail of a tablecloth, of a Shabbos tablecloth. There's her robe, and there is the tablecloth. I wonder whether it's taking her to Sinai, to the mountain itself. You think, Rick, you think it is?
That's what I got. Yes, she looked, wow, the Sabbath tablecloth is now coming to bring me, and on a different plane, a different level, but she was there in some way, maybe even beyond what people in some way.
I'm also wondering how many other Chavas there were, how many other people were there in spirit but weren't actually there, because they were doing, I don't think she was the only one that was tending to the baby or the laundry or, you know, whatever it is that's important. And I don't even know if it just applies to the women. I mean, there were other people that had other jobs to do. And yet she did feel like she was there at that moment. She got something from it, and it took her to a place. And, you know, I'm still thinking about that distinct name at the end and what you titled it. Is that your title or?
That's her title.
That's her title?
Yeah, Shem
Distinct
HaMefurash.
name.
But we will get to that. Robert, I think you had something
Yeah.
to say before and did not recognize.
You know, Debbie's always right. So we're not far from Passover, and it strikes me that the sound of silence is like the plague of darkness. Thing is quiet, and you can't hear. There's just nothing to be heard. And I think there's an interweaving between the two.
Right, a kind of auditory blindness, a kind of deafness.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
overwhelmed by the silence.
And this speaks nothing to the back half of the poem. It only speaks to the first half of the poem where she's setting the scene. But that's what I heard / saw when we were reading that, was the darkness in the plagues in Egypt.
As the ninth plague. The darkness is the ninth plague, which, according to many a scholar, rabbinic and literary scholar, because they certainly overlapped from ancient to modern times, but according to many an interpreter, the ninth plague was really the worst, that this was really 3 times 3 plus 1 plagues, that they were layered in threes. And that the plague of darkness was the thing most feared by the Egyptians, for whom the Pharaoh was always a god, the incarnation of a god, and always the sun, and was absolutely unfailing in rising and in presence, beneficence, all the attributes that you can apply to the sun. Harsh and withering and life-giving, and the thing most disturbing to the Egyptians would be blotting out the sun for 3 days. So there's something about then comes the epilogue, which of course strikes to the heart almost literally of the Pharaoh and certainly of his family, which is the way the story takes us. But let's not ignore the power of the darkness. And here there is absolute silence, uncharacteristic, she says, perhaps a little sarcastically, uncharacteristic of any group of Jews, yes, of Hebrew folk. And even the chatter of the animals, not even children sitting on their father's shoulders being carried to the mountain, everything absolutely silent.
Evelina?
Yeah.
Giselle,
yeah.
Sherry, Rachel.
Great.
Giselle.
Giselle.
Thank you. I just was looking at the verb mechakim, like to wait, appears like 3 times. It seems like everyone is waiting in their own way for a different thing, and it's also true for everyone, like in our own life. So mechakim and mechakim and mechakim in 2 lines, 3 times. And then sheket, like the silent twice, and that gives like a combination. It helps the combination of the poem of sacred and secular, like very important things, magnificent, but at the same time, like everyday things, like visa, like the laundry, and like heating the milk for the baby. So it seems like there are the 2 extremes, and like that mechakim, that wait, represent like the different kind of people that were waiting at Mount Sinai.
Thanks so much for that, for the twin observations there about waiting, waiting, waiting. And in a second, maybe I'll ask you, before we continue with a couple of other folks who are waiting in the queue, I'll ask you to just read those 2 lines of the poem at the beginning, Giselle, so that we get to hear it and listen for the verb mechakim, and to see it in the Hebrew. The last word of the first line, the first word of the second line, and the last word of the second line. And so that's one observation about their waiting at the mountain, and the other observation about how we combine, or how we address the issue of combining what is secular with what is holy. What is the holy space, and what is it that you're supposed to be doing there? Do you get to define it yourself? Is she waiting someplace else, perhaps, and waiting, although the verb isn't used again, she's waiting for something else, or she's anticipating something else that's going to move her to a place of, well, Rick thinks it's Sinai. I'm not so sure that it's Sinai, but we'll wait and see if others have a thought about it. But some place of love and the fulfillment, the realization of Sinai. I was trying to not use the word holy because she doesn't use it, so why should I? Anyway, maybe can you read us the first 2 lines of the poem, and we'll listen for the verb mechakim.
Yes, and then I also wanted to say like the word tzipia, like the anticipation, or to wait, and then comes something like very secular, like she's waiting for the laundry to be dry. So I just find it fascinating, like the combination of both. כולם כבר הלכו אל ההר ומחכים, מחכים לראות, בשקט רב מחכים. שלא כמנהגם, גם חמורים, גם הגמלים, בשקט הזה ציפור לא צייצה. גם ילדים על כתפי אבותיהם, והשקט רב מנשוא, כמו לפני דבר גדול ונורא. ואני עוד רציתי להספיק ולתלות את הכביסים, לעשות זמן לעצמי, לתקן ריחותיי, וחיממתי את החלב לתינוק, שלא ירעב, שלא יבכה חלילה. ברגע הלא מתאים, כמה זמן עד כלות הציפייה, שתתייבש הכביסה והתינוק מה. איש לא ידע, ואני ראיתי שרוח קלה, כמו נשימתו של איש ישן עברה, בכביסים ונפחה הקריסה של כותנתי ומפת השבת, הייתה מפרש לבן באמצע המדבר, ויצאנו משם על התכלת, הרחק למקום בו נפרוט רימונים ונאכל עסיסם, למקום בו לאהבה שם מפורש.
Thank you for the beautiful reading. I hope you heard the word, the verb mechake, mechakim, to which she first made reference. Giselle first made reference. Evelina, you had something, and I don't remember who else. And Rachel. Evelina?
Evelina, you're muted.
You have to unmute yourself.
Giselle beautifully articulated what I was going to say, except to be one thing I thought of when you were mentioning that she was probably not the only woman who was left behind schlepping the laundry. I wondered who the we was when she said they were carried off into the blueness, and I bet the we is the other women.
Could be the baby.
Nice idea.
At the end, I was just determined to make a home for them.
Thank you. There's the they at the beginning, and there's a we at the end. And she tells us really in detail who the they are, but she doesn't tell us who the we are and how she assimilates herself back into the group.
Yeah.
Is it she and her beloved? Is it she and her fellow women? Is it she and the mothers? Is it the whole people? Have they been taken? Has the sail, the now full sail, billowed and carried them all on this Aladdin-like boat? Thanks for that image too, Rick. Taken them to Sinai, or taken them beyond Sinai, taken them to the place for which they are destined, taken them to a land of promise that she's imagining.
In a land of pomegranates.
Where they can eat pomegranates, which for the rabbis, you know about pomegranates and rabbinic tradition, for the rabbis, for the ancient sages, the pomegranate was the great example of Torah. You open a pomegranate and you see, their commentary of the Song of Songs has this many, many times. And there are other places too where the image appears. You cut the pomegranate and you see these half circles of pomegranate seeds, and they are the sages sitting in their semicircular rows in the Beit Midrash, dressed in their dark or black garments. And they seem hard, but that's really the fruit. And everything else is really the rind. And the seeds just proliferate. There are more seeds than you can count, or than maybe that you could imagine. And each one of those pomegranates in the ancient rabbinic world this was all about learning Torah. So here's a poem about Sinai, and she's talking about sitting in love and eating pomegranates. Something else for us to tuck away. Rachel, and Barbara, I see.
Evelina, thank you for that. I was also looking at the change from the they to the I to the we, and just feeling emotion in the whole poem of waiting and constricted and quiet and keeping in, and opening, and opening with this light wind and the billowing of the robe. The middle of the robe looks like, to me, a pregnant belly, the robe. And the Shabbat tablecloth also billows and becomes a sail. It gets bigger. And the pomegranate, I sort of see fertility and birth and I don't know about rebirth, but definitely birth. The pomegranate so full with all the different seeds. And I saw the we as God. I saw the we as God filling up the tablecloth, the sail with God's spirit, and not in a sort of weird sex pregnancy way, but just sort of like the potential of life is really what I was seeing there. And I have a question about the Hebrew for the billow, mifras, and where you have distinct name, miforash. Are those two words related in terms of something getting larger, increasing? Are they? I don't know if they have the same root or not.
Paras and parash are oftentimes interchanged, and this is a very, very powerful poet. She is a wizard of a poet. She's a Jedi of a poet. She is just she has extraordinary skill, and she's not missing anything. I mean, she chooses those two words. She is choosing well.
Is that also
To
parsha?
be, yes,
Parsha.
parasha also comes from that root. And lifros means to spread something out, to make it absolutely clear. A crumpled sheet of paper or a verse of Torah that's too tangled and needs to be spread out. That's a paras. It's also lifrosh. It's a perush. Yeah, it's both. It's the same root. To articulate something, to show all of its parts up close and in detail. So mifras is the sail, actually. Yeah, it's not the billowing part of it. That's a verb that has a different story to it. But the mifras is the sail. And it's carrying them, whoever the them is. Barbara.
That was my niece, by the way. Hi, Rachel.
I thought she was my niece.
She was my niece before she was your niece. Oh,
Yeah,
wait, no, it's about the same time.
About the same time. Let's not pick nits over this, but yeah.
Okay, BJ here. So
BJ.
I mean, my observation is a little bit more mundane, but what I was looking at was the first part and most of the poem has to do with everyday reality. She's hanging the laundry, she's worried about feeding the baby, and all the things that are going on in the present. And then the last couple of sentences are kind of what she's imagining, what her fantasy, where it can take her. And it also reminds me of sometimes when we're doing everyday chores, and I hang out the laundry myself, so that, you know, we're not necessarily thinking, oh, I'm going to hang a sheet here and I'm going to feed the baby there, but, you know, we're fantasizing what life could be like or what the future could hold. And so those last couple of sentences are kind of like what she's imagining life can be like away from her everyday mundane life. That was what I was thinking about.
Thank you. Thanks, BJ.
Barbara, do you think that that's why she mentioned not just a tablecloth, but a Shabbat tablecloth? You know, that's the sort of spiritual part, or the, you know, the day when everything is embellished, and so it wasn't just like a sheet.
Right, right. Not just everyday thing, but it's something that's special.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, I think that's a good point.
Thank you. And the idea of a Shabbat tablecloth is not out of joint. It's not anachronistic. You could say, wait a minute, we know who they are standing at the mountain so that they can receive the Torah. Apparently you have to be in some sacred space in order to receive that. And here she's got a Shabbos tablecloth already that she's already washed and bleached, and the sun is helping take care of correcting whatever, you know, the baby has spilled on it or anybody else has spilled on it. The truth is that Shabbat is in the possession of these people, of our ancestors before they got to Sinai. And we know that because a couple of chapters before, just after the crossing of the sea and just after narrowly escaping the Egyptians, they run out of the matzah that they've brought with them, and the manna starts to take over and becomes the stuff of their existence. And Moses tells them, because God tells him, you got to collect it every day, and every day you can collect 1 day's worth, and it's only going to be so much and so much. And if you take more than what you started to, what you need, you're not going to end up with more. And if you try to keep it over until the next morning, it's just going to be rotted and infested by the next morning. And the next morning, you have to be able to have the faith, the rabbis would say, to go out and collect it again. And that's true every day of the week except for Friday. And on Friday, you're supposed to gather a double portion of manna because you don't go out on Shabbat in order to gather the manna. So says Moses to the people of Israel, so says God to Moses, and nobody ever says, excuse me, what's a Shabbos? And Moses apparently are speaking language that they already know, telling us perhaps in an interesting and intriguing way that what's new at Sinai is the ordering of principles and values and rules and ideas and rigors and challenges that they already have and that they already know. And what constitutes the covenant at Sinai is a constitution of the ordering of things and the prioritizing of things, and not so much the newness of the thing, but maybe cutting out some other things that they once upon a time had that they didn't have. In any event, she's doing the stuff. They might be at the mountain now hearing about honor the Sabbath day, keep the Sabbath day, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy, and so on. And she's washing the tablecloth. Which part of that is holy, or what's the conspiracy towards holiness that she represents? Her robe. Yeah, yes. I've lost the order. I see Susan's hand. I don't know whether anybody else is up there or not. Sherry, and then Susan. Hold on, Susan. Sherry.
So I saw the poem as a poem in two parts. First of all, I think she's definitely in the wilderness, but she's not at Sinai. But she's still in the wilderness. She's maybe at the edges of things because they've all gone off, but I'm still back here way at the boundary at the end of the camp, doing the things that I need to do. But then it sort of switches to, but then, and I want to put a then in where it says, but I saw that a light wind. And I want to say, but then I saw a light wind, like a sleeper's breath, through the laundry, was a white sail in the middle of the wilderness, which she is saying she's in the wilderness. And metaphorically or symbolically, this wind with her robe and the tablecloth whisks them away. Now, initially I read we as her and the baby, not a collective we, but literally, because she refers to the baby and it took us, but that's the second part, and it's taking them away to a place of pomegranates. And I saw that it's like, okay, it's done. But then we were taken off to Canaan or Eretz Yisrael, and that's where they've gone to, which is the place of pomegranates and juices, and a place where love has a name, because there is no name in the wilderness. But where they go to afterwards does have a name. And so that's how I saw it, that, she's in the wilderness, but not at Sinai, but she knows what's going on. She's doing what she needs to do, but then is either taken off, but it's going over to the land of Israel.
Thank you.
That's the place where love has a distinct name.
Thank you, and thanks for making us think hard about love and how that is somehow intrudes upon or thunders or lightly breezes into the poem in a very important way at the very end. Nothing about love until then. Well, Susan.
Breitzer, I think. Right. I think
But
Susan, is that right?
I
Jenna?
saw Susan
Yeah,
Rosefield's
but
hand.
Jenna,
Okay.
Jenna's telling us.
Yeah.
So
I
Susan
wanted to talk. Oh, Susan Bright.
Okay.
Breitzer.
Oh, okay. Yeah, well, as we're talking about the order of things, actually, it's along the way I thought of another item, but the reference to the Sabbath tablecloth. Here, other people were at Mount Sinai receiving for the first time the commandment to keep the Sabbath. Yet this woman here seems to already know about it and is specifically preparing for it. And with it, when thinking about gender roles and tradition, in the first place, I was thinking about how, as far as ritual, we prioritize things we do regularly over things we do occasionally. In the Amida prayers, for example, the traditions are secondary to the main prayer. And when it comes to roles that women are actually been assigned the more mundane, yet reminds me of just the way there is holiness in the mundane, that you can be at Sinai just preparing for Shabbat.
Yes. Yeah, thank you. Once again, part of the Midrashic story and even the biblical story is that people already know about Shabbos. But the fact is that quite literally, there's material evidence that she's practicing it, that she's actually doing it. She's got a Shabbos tablecloth. And figuring out how to combine what we might call holy and what we might call mundane. But I'm hoping that part of our reading of this poem, a part of our talking about this together, is going to make us or allow us to think hard about whether there's a distinction, a real distinction. Can you have one without the other, really? And what is it that makes us privilege one over the other? Under what circumstances do we do that? Well, here's what I see. Susan Rosefield, I see Fishers and Cudler, and then I see Debbie Rosenstein pointing at Robert. Oh, all right. So Susan Rosefield.
Unmute.
Okay, thank you very much. I've been preoccupied with the contrast between the robe and the Shabbat tablecloth. As a woman writer, I can't help but think that she imbued the robe with a tremendous sense of the innards of the woman, both in terms of her body and her secular duties and things of that sort. But there's a strong symbolic contrast between the robe, which a woman might wear all day until her husband comes home, and the linen cloth, which represents a sort of transcendent object. And then, so you have these two opposite things between the secular and the essence of the woman and the sacred of the linen cloth, and how the spirit in the blowing wind comes and fills her robe, which to me felt like the holiness was coming into her secular life, her bodily life.
Thank you.
And that's the whole thing about Shabbat, right? Is the separation between the secular of the regular work week and the sacred of making a special space in your home or in your heart to remember Shabbat.
Yeah, no accident that that's the image that she uses, huh? Right there, where Friday night becomes Shabbat, where Erev and Shabbat come together. Erev is the Hebrew word that means to mix something together, to mix two things together. The Erev is where the colors mix together, where you can no longer distinguish the day from the night, where you're starting to lose the distinction. Boker, that means morning, on the other hand, means to be able to critique something. It gives us the Hebrew word for critique, quite literally. You can see the difference between one thing and the next. You can discern things in the Boker, but in the Erev, things are coming together. There used to be 2 colors there, or 5 colors, and now there are only 2, and now there's, well, only 1, perhaps. That might be an overstatement. I don't want to argue with the artists like Susan Rosefield about whether, there's only 1 color to the night or not. I know there's not, but just I overstate it for the purpose of saying that Erev is where things come together.
She sees them as white.
Thanks for that. Fissures. Now that's pretty cagey because I don't know whether it's 1 fissure or 3 fissures or how many the hell fissures you got over there that I don't know about. But whoever it is, take it away.
That'd be me.
That would be you.
Yay.
Yeah. And so the part that stuck out to me was the line to make some time for myself to freshen up, and sort of the idea of that she needs to take, or like you need to take the time for yourself to be able to be part of a community and to participate in the giving of the Torah, like to be a present member, that you have to take care of yourself first and have yourself be settled to then be settled as part of the group.
Thanks so much. Thanks so much for that. Is that a constituent part of what it means, even as BJ was saying, to fold the laundry by yourself? Is that taking time for yourself? I fold the laundry oftentimes by myself. I fold the sheets, and oh yes, I'm very good at folding fitted sheets. I do it in a very particular way. Perhaps I should make a YouTube of it.
The Torah of,
if it weren't
of the fitted sheet.
Can you teach him?
I don't know whether I can or not, but I might be able to.
That's a hard task.
I might be able to, but it's very true that that these tasks are quieting. Meditative. Yeah. All right. Who was that?
Harold.
Harold Cudler, MD. I used to watch you on television all the time.
Yeah, I was canceled, unfortunately.
He was canceled.
Yeah, but I think listening to the conversation, it is a fascinating poem, and I think that the poet is really setting us up with the silence that's emphasized at the beginning, because I think she's playing out the idea that we're already primed to think of the revelation at Sinai as words, and we think of that because we're told that everybody heard these words and that they become the Torah, so they're words. But and she demonstrates that she herself is really a master of words, and she's playing with words. Like you're saying, she's got Moses' words and all sorts of words, and of course the poem is beautifully constructed out of words. But the image that the words mount up to is really something very material, and pomegranate juice is flowing, and the idea that this revelation at Sinai is not just a bunch of words, it's something that's both spiritual and physical, sensual. It's all these things at once. And I think what she's doing is playing on that expectation. Well, these are a bunch of words. Wait, listen for it. Here come the words. But it's so much more than that. And she's trying to offer that view of the revelation to us. And it gets you wherever you are, and it takes you where you need to be. La makon. It takes you to the place where love has a distinct name. Even that, the title, a distinct name, is a kind of a joke, of a pun, of an ironic statement that it's really a mixture of so many things.
Thank you. we're going to take just a couple of more minutes. I'd love to sum up. I don't want to cut anybody off.
Rosenstein.
Rosenstein, or Debbie, you had something to say. Yeah.
Okay, I'm ready. Okay,
Okay.
I saw this very simply, and everybody's waiting for God to speak, and they have to be quiet to hear God, what God has to say. But she has work to do, so she goes about doing it. Not to worry, she'll still hear God when He speaks. And the baby symbolizes renewal, the laundry symbolizes purification, and the pomegranate understanding Torah, understanding God, understanding her place in the world.
Thank you. Thanks for that parade of images and associations, and also for reminding me that laundry plays a role in the story, in the preparation for Sinai story. Shelley, you're nodding. Maybe that was on your mind. Yeah. Yeah, do your laundry. You've just got to make yourself distinct in every single way. And part of that distinction is having everything about you be laundered and clean. And she's still about that task. Well, we'll close up, and I'll tell you what I would love to do next time. I want to just catch a couple of threads on my needle here and pull them together. One of them is that that the robe that she wears, this is a robe. This is a kutonet. It is a word in modern Hebrew, but in biblical Hebrew, kutonet is a robe that is delicate and embroidered, and it's Joseph's coat of many colors, as it were. It's a robe that's worn by the princesses of the house of David. It's a robe that is cataloged by the whoever did the cataloging in the ancient Babylonian quartermasters, offices. It's the robe that the princesses would wear. It was called kutontu, or something of that sort. Kutontu. It's just almost like kutonet.
Is it also katon like a broom?
No, it's a different word.
Okay.
Yeah. So there's something maybe not ordinary about kutanti, about the kutonet that she's wearing. So I'll just leave that for you. The pomegranate juice and the place where that juice is devoured, the place where love is actually called by a distinct name. The place, we've talked about it before, and we'll have occasion to talk about it again. That word, the place, is a rabbinic name for God. The rabbis will always talk about we'll always talk about hamakom as being God. Baruch hamakom, the Haggadah says. Blessed is the place that takes place everywhere, that is always there. And finally, the title of the poem, Shem Meforash, a distinct name. Rachel already mentioned to us some time back that mifras, which means sail, and meforash, which means something that is distinct or well articulated. Really, they look the same, they sound almost the same, and the sin and the shin, and sometimes the samach and the shin and a sin, will interchange to give us these different roots that mean the same thing in different fashions and in different eras. Shem HaMeforash, I've translated as a distinct name, but with some trepidation. There is a bilingual edition. I don't remember the name of it. You can do an Amazon search for it and find it easily. There is a bilingual edition of Chava Pinchas Cohen's poetry, and in that, I don't remember the name of her translator, Sharon someone, but in that book, the title of this poem is Shem Meforash, just the Hebrew transliterated into English. Shem Meforash the detailed, the explicit, the distinct, the manifest, the ineffable name. Or maybe ineffable is what she calls it there. Ineffable is probably a better translation anyway. You can't say it. The Shem HaMeforash is a technical term for Yud He Vav He, for those 4 letters that spell out what we imagine to be a name for God, if only we knew how to pronounce those letters together. Those letters which in the course of Hebrew's history are both vowels and consonants, sometimes this, sometimes that. Sometimes they indicate some grammatical function like possession or plural possession, and they have no pronunciation at all. So how would you take these 4 letters that look like a conflation, an impossible conflation of the verb to be in past, present, and future, and letters that have the sounds of vowels sometimes, the sounds of consonants sometimes, and have no sound sometimes? How do you take those and make a name out of it? What kind of a name is that? The name that you know but can never say. So there's a feeling here. There's something about how I and we and they come together, how what's regular, what's ordinary, what's not ordinary, what's Sabbath and what's not Sabbath, what's at the base of the mountain and what's at the back of the camp. All of that comes together in this poem that, according to most of the rabbinic traditions that I know, all of them that I know, as I said before, no one thinks that anybody was left out at Mount Sinai. Everybody was there. Everybody was there. But she insists, no, I wasn't there. I did get something. And what I got was, as I waited, a ruach, a spirit / wind, because the word ruach means both spirit and wind, that billowed my sail and took me to here, took me to this place where love has a manifest name and pomegranate juice flows like pomegranate juice everywhere. Well, here's another view. This is another view of Sinai, and I promised a view from a woman who was there, and Chava Pinchas Cohen was there, and there just where she says she is and was. I think we'll do this again in a couple of weeks, and we'll see whether people are enjoying the progress and the procession through the theme. But next time I want to share with you another point of view, a point of view that says, you know what? God gave the Torah as a kind of whatever, gave it to the people of Israel and then left, and people found it and they wanted to return it and didn't know where to return it, and they had to work really hard to figure out where to return this thing that had been dropped on them.
That sounds like an Amichai poem.
It is an Amichai poem. Yeah.
Woohoo!
Another view of Sinai and what it is that we do with this Torah. So we'll put a bookmark in the conversation and carry it on another week, 2 weeks. 2 weeks?
I think it's every 2 weeks, right, Jenna? For a few weeks?
Yes,
But
every 2 weeks. So not next Monday, but the Monday after. And you can always, I'll put my email in the chat again. You can always reach out to me. It's on the Bethel calendar. It's in the announcements. We make Facebook events. If you want to be on a mailing list and I'll personally remind you every week, by all means, send me information. I'll do it.
And if you have something to say further about this poem and you would like to say it to me, please send me an email. And if you want to call, as I said last time, give me a call. Maybe Jen will send out my phone number again to people, and you have my email address, and we will be in touch. Thank you, everyone. Stay well.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Romper room is over.
Thank you.
Baruch Tiyeh.
Thank you. It's great.
Can we stay on for a few minutes?
Absolutely.
It looks like they left. Okay.
Oh, well, I think that the Sagers had to go, but I'm happy to keep the room open.
That's who I wanted to talk to, was my spouse. You know, as long as I've got, it seems that they don't, if you can talk